It is day 133 of 365 days of remembering. Trina Wright here. Today I want to talk about parenting, and I want to talk about it in a different kind of way, in the sense that not that long ago I released a video, and I will post it up here, about speaking my truth, being clean and clear and just authentic about that, and really what it's been like to stand into this recognition that my whole life, really a big part of my theme, has been about standing in my truth, and most of the time my truth being a complete opposite truth to what most of the world lives with. So it's not that hard to imagine how this might fall into place with parenting, because there's so many kind of crazy conditioned things about what it means to be a parent. And especially as I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old, right? Well, almost 17, sorry, she's only 16, but I have these teenage kids that just, there's all these beliefs about teenagers, and it's so hard to know what's true and what has sort of been developed in our culture and then amplified and then had a lot of momentum added to it, and then almost become excuses. I do see some evidence of some of that with them, but I also want to hold to the highest space that I think my kids are capable of stepping into. And I think it's a funny thing that we do so much in our collective. We sort of set kids up to sort of manipulate them or push them, or through punitive means of some sort. Not as much now, but still there's that idea that I know better than you, so you should listen to me, or you should do things the way that I'm telling you to do it, and sort of negating the entire idea that children come with their own inner guidance and their own access to source and their own access to what their soul wants for them, and to have that trust. And the often comment that I hear back is, yeah, but then they might not learn, and then there's this giant list of things they may not learn, or what if they do bad things because of that? And I guess it's that I have such a trust in our natural goodness to start with. I have such a trust in, even though I would say there are many parts in my times of my life, especially as I was more person identified, that I was a crazy hot mess, and that was just my life. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I've taught through the clarity and unclarity of my example with my children. And the best thing ever as a parent is to stand in that space of, like, as I live and breathe, I am teaching them. I am showing them what it means to be blended and being a human who knows that she's source, and sometimes doesn't remember that, and sometimes doesn't even know what that blending means or looks like. But the fact that I'm even reaching for it, the fact that I have awakened the levels that I have awakened to, I believe is such a gift to my children. And so the fact that I did it and they chose me to come on this journey with suggests to me that they have access to that, if that's what they came for, or at least to many, many other steps along the way. And I already see such evidence of that. And so part of my perspective of parenting has been to trust my kids, and in that, just to be all authentic. There are times when I think I would have said it was trust, but it was really kind of laziness on my part, because I didn't want to do my own work to look at what I was bringing to the mix and what I might not want to explore. And I do that on a constant moment-to-moment basis. And there is stuff that sometimes comes up. My daughter's been navigating her own sexual beingness. She's in a relationship and sorting some of that out. And she's really wanted to have this open, authentic relationship with me about it. And in the beginning, it went really well. And then all of a sudden, I felt some of my own things coming up. Like, is this really okay that she's this young and this age, even though she's not that young? And just all those sort of ideas as a woman and a parent that I probably have picked up along my trail about this subject, and really doing my best to, like, just let that go and be able to meet her as full as possible in the moment, and meet her as, like, I think one of the important things to remember is that every being is a being onto themselves, filled with their own experience and their own navigation points and their own, like, where their soul was when they came in and what their soul came here to do. And it's not the same for everyone. And so, maybe like it's like something like getting a great job and making lots of money. That's supposed to be every parent's dream for their kid. And yet I would say I want my kids to be happy. And I do want them to have an understanding that as it stands at this time in this world, for the most part, we use money to exchange for things. And so depending upon the lifestyle that you want to create, it's a really good idea to have some idea about how much money it takes to create some of that flow. But I also think that with enough trust and enough belief and understanding how the law of attraction works, and I've already seen evidence of this, these new generations are going to come in and they're just going to manifest the shit out of everything. They're going to know how to do the stuff that we found hard because the world is in a more open place, so they haven't had so much offness. They've been able to navigate it in a more free way. And I've seen evidence with this with both my 16-year-old and my 12-year-old. I mean, my 16-year-old manifested this fabulous, wonderful man, boy in her life. And I know there's been times where she's just like, Mom, it's just so good. And she finds it hard to believe that it was like exactly all the things that she imagined she wanted in a guy. And here he is. And so now at such a young age, she's had that experience to understand how she creates her own reality, even if she doesn't put it in those words. But having had those experiences with me and seeing it and having me talk to her about it, now she has that connection point of experientially living it, directly experiencing it for herself, makes it much more tangible, much more viable as a way to live your life. So that's really cool. And we also had this incident where, I don't know, a few months ago, before the world was sheltering in place and they were going to school, when I was pulling up to the parking lot, well, to the side of the curb where I was going to drop her off to go to school, I was pulling in, so I was looking forward, and she had this like mortified look on her face, and I just didn't know what was going on. And I was like, what? Like the car had come to a stop, and she was like, Mom, oh, that dog just got hit by a car. And she was so beside herself and so upset about it and like visibly concerned. And, of course we moved into that, and the dog had died, and there was some other people, including the person that had hit the dog. And, in a few moments she said, I really need to tell him that it wasn't his fault because the dog ran between the front and the back wheels, and there's no chance that he could have seen him, but I just don't know. I can't. I'm afraid I'll cry. And so I said I would go do it. And I went over and I said something to him. And then one of the neighbors of the person that owns the dog was there. And she said, oh, did your daughter witness it? And I said, yeah. And I think she was 15 at the time, or maybe she was 16. And I said, yeah, and she's quite shooken up. She really wants to be a police officer, and she's worried that this was so upsetting to her that she won't be able to do it. And the woman asked if she could come and sit with her, and she sat next to her and asked if she could hug her. And there was just this like visceral connection. Like this was like someone older than her own mother, someone who she'd never even met before, but they had this little connection around this very human experience. And then what's so amazing is a little bit later, as the day unfolded and the weeks unfolded, is my daughter started to reframe the meaning. And like literally her and I were able to talk about how if it had been a ball, or if it had been a garbage pail, or if it had been something else, then she wouldn't have been as upset about it. And not that I'm negating the life of the dog or of anyone else, but it's important to have awareness that when we attach a really deep, especially emotionally deep meaning to something, it's much, much harder to get out from under it. And ultimately, in my mind, the number one way that I would want to be with this, and what I would want to teach my kids, is yes, when something happens that seems upsetting or disturbing, we fully feel that right there in that moment, and then it passes through us, and then we continue. We don't have to hold it. We don't have to tell everybody about it. We don't have to ache about it for days and days and days. We just have a recognition that, yes, when that came into this field of awareness, I felt sad for that little dog, but then I quickly was able to recognize, not because I bypassed anything, but because I fully allowed the sadness to come, that it's okay. Because in essence, loving everything that arises and making peace with it is ultimately one of the most highest spiritual callings that we all have. So here she was at this young age, having this experience, this opportunity to play in herself and to find a new way to navigate her world. So we had explored the concept of meeting being optional. And of course, I'm not saying that if it was someone else, I mean, her father did die when she was 6 years old. So she has had a whole lot of her lifetime finding ways to reframe that, finding new ways to not be so attached to the meaning of that experience. Why? Because it doesn't serve her. And she's even on some occasions been able to say, it already happened. She didn't make it happen. She was 6 years old. But it already did happen. And now when she looks back at the last 10 years and who she's become, she knows that that was a pivotal event in her life that opened her in ways that maybe would not have been opened if that thing hadn't happened. And so she can even frame it through that perspective, which I think is unbelievable and amazing. And so that's where I choose to put my focus, is on all the ways this little tiny being, this little soul that I welcome to the world is unfolding and is awakening to herself. And I feel so blessed and privileged to get to watch it with her and her other 3 siblings. It's exactly why I chose to be a parent. And not because, I mean, initially, I think there definitely was some parts of me that children helped me get into alignment. And maybe I wanted to feel a sense of being needed and I wanted to have a purpose in life. Well, lots of people want to have a purpose, so that's not that surprising. But now I just feel this gift that I have to have these relationships, and all 4 of them are so different. They're so unique. They're in such different places with their sense of their awareness and their desires about what they want to be aware of. And me being able to make my own peace with all of that constantly calls me to deeper expansion in myself. And I think parenting from this place where it's like a key concept, a key endeavor on the spiritual path of my own unfolding, also matched in and blended in with their spiritual awakening and their spiritual expansion. Because let's face it, we're all expanding. It might look different, but inevitably they're expanding in many, many ways, especially since they're still kind of kids. They're still growing up, maturing. So they're always expanding. But I'll tell you that they push my buttons in ways that other people don't, which is constantly my wake-up call to myself to say, how can I move better with this? How can I shift something so that I can perceive this differently? What would it look like if I could do that? And I was just listening to an older Bentino Massaro sharing, and he was talking to mom, and she was talking about one of the things that I know would be relevant for me is, when my kids don't talk very nicely to me or they're not very helpful and they're sort of seemingly disrespectful. And one of the claims that he made is that they're coming from a different paradigm than I am. Like they don't actually give a shit about whether the house is clean or not. I do, but they don't give meaning to that same thing, and that doesn't make them wrong. And that's what my whole point is I think as parents and as part of the collective and part of our conditioning, we've often believed and then enacted from a place that what I believe and what makes me happy as the mother is exactly what my kids should do. And if they don't do it, that's a sign of disrespect. But is it? Because if it doesn't land for them and they just don't experience it, well, then what? It's my job to teach them that at 16 and 13 years old, they need to be really amplified up about our house and how cleanliness and all that stuff. I mean, don't they have an entire life to think about, contemplate, and worry about that? And I don't think there's any evidence that says if they don't give a shit about it right now, that's going to be the story for the rest of their life, because we're all expanding beings. And isn't that great that we all get to test things out? We all get to stand in different places and say, well, I kind of like the feeling of this and I don't like the feeling of that. And we all know that words don't teach. When we actually learn from the experience, it lands more. And so being a parent that can give a child the space to come into those experiences on their own, well, that's really going to change things. That's really going to make a big difference. So that is a lot about my truth in parenting that is becoming every day. And it's not from a place of like, I have it figured out. I just know that ultimately freedom, connection, and knowing who they are, those are the gifts that I think I can give my children that they can't get anywhere else. How to like cook and do dishes and keep clean. They can learn that viscerally in the moment. They're going to learn that in other relationships. And just to be clear, I am teaching them that. But if they're not ready to learn it or they don't pick it up in the way that I want, even things like school, I think we can learn equally through the things we don't do as we can through the things that we do. And we do. And there's nothing serious going on here. Like there just really isn't. I mean, so what if they don't figure something out and they're a little late in the game? Or so what if they figure it out and then change their mind? Aren't all of those things just perfectly okay and beautiful? And don't I want them to feel into themselves that, like, I'm going to follow my own resonance and I'm going to trust where that resonance takes me, more than what my mom would say, or more than what the collective would say, or more than what my friends or my partner or anybody else, the world at large, would say. And instead, I'm going to bring myself to being tuned into here, into my own field of beingness, and feel it intuitively with myself. So, I mean, all of those things are steps in the awakening space, steps in getting them to be more connected to themselves. And that is the gift that I believe I'm here to give my children. So thank you. If you have any comments about what it means to parent in this spiritual paradigm, in this new way of, like, making the top priority be how they feel and how connected they can be to themselves, and really doing our own work in this process of awakening to our own conditioning and to our own held beliefs about what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a teenager, how I'm supposed to know better, or you're supposed to know better just because you are a parent, and really checking that out. I'd love to hear about your experience. If you enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up. If you have anything to share, comment below. And if you liked this sort of musing that I do, and this sort of sharing through the clarity of my example, click the subscribe button so you can hear more of them, and we can really get into this expanding thing together. Bye.